Hello again, welcome back. In the last lecture we talked about a particular worm or virus called CodeRed. Today we're going to talk about CodeRedII. Well, you recall that CodeRed was a virus that started propagating in July of 2001. Excuse me. And it was in the first version. There were two versions that came out. The first version wasn't very successful because of a flaw in the code. And yet the virus writer was very adaptive, and in about a week later version 2 came out, which was much more damaging because they had corrected the flaws. Well, in a few weeks after that, another version came out, which is typically called CodeRedII. Now, it's not clear that CodeRedII was actually related to CodeRed1 at all, except that clearly the writer of CodeRedII knew about CodeRed1 because he used the string CodeRed in the code. So anyway, what does this do? Well, CodeRed1 tried to launch a denial of service attack on the White House and also deface some web pages. CodeRedII didn't do any of those things. It installed a backdoor on the machines which were infected, probably to set up a botnet later on. Okay, so what does CodeRedII do? Well, when it first infects a host, it looks to see if the host is already infected and then just doesn't bother. And then it installs this backdoor machine and then tries to propagate itself. Okay, so how does it do that? Well, it launches a number of threads, 300 or 600 threads, each of them attacking other machines. And which machines does it attack? Well, once again, it has a way of generating IP addresses, and it does that in a way that's much cleverer than CodeRed1. So what it does is, some of the time it generates a random IP address, but most of the time it uses part of the current IP address and as a prefix, and then adds on some additional bits. Now, what's the reason for that, or why is that a smart strategy? Well, it turns out that if you use the same prefix, then you're on the same subnet or part of the internet, and it may be a much more likely possibility that the machines on that subnet will be running the same software. So for example, if you're within the same company or within the same university, say, a lot of those machines may be running similar software, and so you may have more luck infecting those machines. Also, unlike CodeRed1, CodeRedII tried to infect computers as opposed to many of the other things on the internet, and so it stayed away from certain IP addresses. Okay, so we've already said this. Unlike CodeRedII doesn't deface anything. It just installs this mechanism by which you can have remote access to the machine. And as far as I know, no one ever tried to exercise that, and so we don't know who might have been doing this. Okay, one of the interesting things about CodeRedII, though, is it used the same vulnerability as CodeRed. And remember, CodeRed came out in July, and then CodeRedII came out in August. And then someone did a study toward the end of August of that year, which was 2001, seeing how many people had actually patched that vulnerability. Because by then there were these two worms circulating in the wild that were utilizing that vulnerability to infect machines. And so you'd think it would be a high priority for people to patch them. However, the people that did this study found that that wasn't the case. Depending upon the country, you know, in the United States, for example, 60% of vulnerable machines were patched. But in China, for example, only 13% of vulnerable machines were patched. So what's the upshot of this? It means that there's this huge population of unpatched machines out there which are vulnerable to these worms. And so that means that they're going to keep circulating because they have a population, a vulnerable population in which to circulate. Somebody did a study, another study, this was Verizon Business, of 230 million compromised customers. And what they found was that 9 out of 10 times, the vulnerability that was exploited was one for which a patch had been available 6 months before the attack happened. And so what does that mean? It means that we're really lousy about patching our machines, and we should do better, because the result is that it makes the internet much more vulnerable because we've got all of these machines out there which are susceptible to attack. Thanks much.